is Jan Rosinski. I am the vice chair of the commission, but Dee Oliver is gone today, so I will be acting chair. Before we get started, I've asked Commissioner Redmond to please lead us in prayer, and this will be followed by the pledge by Commissioner Horsley. Would please stand.
Let's all bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity to come together as friends with these friends of ours from our community to try and make this community a better place. We ask that you guide us so that we might act in fairness, with wisdom, and whatever mistakes we make them honestly. As always, we're grateful for the sacrifice of your Son, Jesus Christ, that our sins might be forgiven, and we look forward to the day that we might join our friends, neighbors, family members, and other dear departed in the kingdom of heaven. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Redmond and Commissioner Horsley. I have asked Commissioner Ripley if he would please introduce the members.
Thank you very much. I want to start on my right, your left, and our first honored guest here is Kay Wilson, who's our city attorney. He keeps us straight. Glad to have her here. George Alcazar is not here. He's a contractor. He represents the Beach District. He's absent today. Jack Wall is our next commissioner, and he's a civil engineer, and he represents the Rose Hall District. Dave Weiner is a commercial sales, and he represents the Kentsville District. To my immediate right is Don Horsley, and he's a farmer, and Don's at-large. I'm Ron Ripley, and I'm an at-large member as well, and I'm in the real estate development and management business. Dee Oliver is not here today. She's our chairman. She usually sits right here in the middle, and she's a funeral director, and she's also an at-large member. Jan Rosinski is in property management with Long and Foster. It's commercial. She represents the Centerville District, and she's our vice chair, and she'll be chairing the meeting today. Next to her is Mike Inman. He's an attorney. He's an attorney in real estate business, development and community associations. He is an at-large member as well. Dave Redmond is in commercial real estate. Dave sits next to Mike, and he represents the Bayside District, and he's in commercial real estate. Whitney Graham is in land development, and he represents the Lynn Haven District. And seated on the far end is Steve Barnes, and he is a farmer, and he represents the Princess Anne District. And our planning director, Bobby DeJean, if you don't mind, if you would introduce your staff and guest here today, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ripley. Starting with our clerks, we have Delina Cartwright and Pam Sanloop. With the planning department staff, we have Carolyn Smith, our planning administrator, Bill Landfair, our planning evaluation coordinator. Waddell, new with us. We were able to take him from Chesapeake as our planner 3 that leads the group. Marshall Coleman, planner, Jonathan Sanders, Aubie Trebleclock, also with the planning and development services center, Kevin Kemp, our zoning administrator, Carrie Bookholt, our DSC administrator, and Seth Edwards, our engineering supervisor for the development services center. I don't believe there's anyone else.
Okay, thank you. The first order of business is the explanation of the rules for which we run the meeting. Would the city clerk please read those for me?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Virginia Beach Planning Commission takes pride in being fair and courteous to all parties in attendance. It is important that all involved understand how the commission normally conducts its meetings. It is equally important that everyone treat each other and the members of the commission with respect and civility. The commission requests that if you have a cell phone, please either silence it or turn it off. This is an abbreviated explanation of the rules. The complete set of rules is located in the front of the Planning Commission agenda. Following is the order of business for this public hearing. Withdrawals and deferrals. The chairman will ask if there are any requests to withdraw or defer an item on the agenda. Consideration of these requests will be made first. Consent agenda. The second order of business is the consideration of the consent agenda, which are those items that the Planning Commission believe are unopposed and which have favorable staff recommendation. regular agenda. The commission will then proceed with the remaining items on the agenda. Please note that the actions taken by the commission today are in the form of a recommendation to the Virginia Beach City Council. The final decision to approve or disapprove an application will be made by the City Council. The commission thanks you for your attendance, and we hope that your experience here today leaves you feeling that you have been heard and treated fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next order of business is to address those items that, to be deferred or withdrawn. Please come forward if you have an item to be withdrawn. Okay, I am not aware of any item to be withdrawn. Does anyone have an item to be deferred? Please come forward at this time. Okay, the chair has been made aware that item number 7 and number D3 have been deferred. May I have a motion to defer these items?
Mrs. Brzezinski, I'd move that we indefinite deferral for items 7 and D3.
Second.
Okay, the vote is open. By a recorded vote of 9-0, agenda items 7 and D3 have been deferred.
Thank you. The next order of business, we will address those items that have been placed on the consent agenda. The acting vice chair, Dave Weiner, will handle this portion of the agenda for us.
Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski. Today we have 5 items on the consent agenda. The first one is item 1, Peter Coleman and Joan Shepard, street closure adjacent to 709 Vanderbilt Avenue, Beach District. And here comes our representative.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Commission, for the record, Eddie Burdon, Virginia Beach Attorney representing the applicants. We appreciate being on the consent agenda. All 4 conditions as recommended by staff are acceptable to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this being on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we've asked Mr. Ripley to read this into the record, please.
This is a street closure that's at 709 Vanderbilt Avenue, and it's a closure that's behind this particular piece of property. It's been other parts of this paper street has been closed, so this is not unusual. And the public viewers have been out and viewed it. They don't believe there's the public has any interest at this point that it's appropriate to convey it. And so they brought it to the Planning Commission for our recommendation to council, and we recommend that it be approved.
Thank you. The next item is item number 3, Christina Machone for a conditional use permit automotive garage, repair garage on 2601 Production Road, Beach District. Is there a representative for this item? Welcome. Please come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Christina Marchone,
All the conditions approved are acceptable?
acceptable.
Great, thank you. You can have a seat. Thank you. Is there any opposition to this being placed on a consent agenda? Hearing none, Commissioner Graham has been asked to read this in the record.
This is a conditional use permit application for automotive repair garage. The property is located at 2601 Production Road in Unit 102. This is in the West Oceana area. It's an industrial warehouse that is currently zoned I-1 Light Industrial. The site is currently developed with a 7,000 square foot industrial warehouse building. The proposed tenant would be in a 3,000 square foot unit. And it would be for operation of an automotive repair garage. There are currently 13 on-site parking spaces, and the tenant is only required to have, I believe it's 4, is that right? Is that right? Is that correct? 4? There's ample parking for the use. We're recommending approval with the recommended conditions.
Thank you. Next item is item number 5, Chanel Latham for a conditional use permit for assembly use at 4604 Pembroke Lake Circle, Bayside District. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Chanel Latham.
Are all the conditions accepted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is any opposition to this being placed on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we've asked Commissioner Redmond to read this into the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Weiner. Madam Chairwoman, this is an application for a conditional use permit for an assembly use. This site is located in the Bayside District near the intersection of Pembroke Boulevard and Independence Boulevard in the northwest part of the city. Applicant's proposing to operate an event rental space of approximately 1,000 square feet in an existing building in what's classified as a shopping center. And for this, she intends to rent the space out for engagement events, bridal showers, gender reveals, small gatherings. All food preparation would not occur here, but on an off-site location. The use in itself is fairly ordinary. She proposes, or at least has intended, to limit the number of guests to no more than 49 people, but the site is a little bit small for the parking requirement that would entail. As a result, the city's recommended and the applicant has accepted a limitation on the hours to peak times, to non-peak times on the weekends and on the evenings. The commission believes that seems to make some sense. It is subject to a conditional use permit. If there are any problems with parking or any other kinds of intrusions, it could be revisited at a later date. Nonetheless, we saw some wisdom in that, so we recommend that it be approved by consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redmond.
Pardon me, Mr. Weiner?
Yes.
Could we also clarify that condition number 1 in the staff report has been eliminated?
I apologize. Thank you for catching me on that. There was a in error condition number 1 about the approval of the health department. It's not necessary, and so this is done with a striking condition number 1 because it simply is not applicable
Thank
due
you.
to the off-site food preparation. Thank you, Caroline.
Next item is not item number 8. Monica Yvonne Lancaster for a conditional use permit for family daycare center at 1505 Colebrook Drive, Centerville District. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Monica Lancaster?
And all the conditions acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any opposition to this being placed on the consent agenda? Hearing none, ask Commissioner Inman to read this into the record, please.
Thank you, David. This is a conditional use permit for family daycare located at 1505 Colebrook Drive. This property is located in the middle of a largely populated residential area, and has, for the past 2 years, the applicants provided daycare services for up to 4 children in her residence in the Lake Christopher neighborhood. The parcel is about 8,700 square foot and has an outdoor playground in the rear yard enclosed by a 6-foot privacy fence. Typically, the hours of operation are 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And there's one full-time employee and the primary provider. The use permit for operation of family daycare is consistent with the intent and goals of the comprehensive plan. The staff has observed that applicants requested a maximum of 12 children, and the family daycare home with 4 or less does not require a permit, but we have to have a use permit for more than that. So we're going to approve this by consent for 12. Staff recommends that we approve it. There are 9 conditions on it, which the applicant has stated are acceptable, and on that basis, the commissioners recommend that it be approved by consent.
Thank you, sir. Next is item 10, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, modification for conditions to Environmental Education Center at 3663 Marlin Bay Drive in the Bayside District. A representative? There you
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Steve Romine, local attorney for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We appreciate being placed on the consent agenda. The two conditions are acceptable, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this being placed on a consent agenda? Hearing none, Commissioner Redmond to read this into the record.
Thank you,
please.
Mr. Weiner. Thank you, Mr. Romine. This is an application by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Inc., with regard to their Brock Environmental Center at Pleasure House Point in the Bayside District. Specifically, it is for a modification of conditions. Some years ago, 2012 actually, conditional use permit was issued for this site for a wind energy conversion system, which is in place and in operation. The center now wishes to build an addition to the east end of the existing building, which would consist of a deck connecting to an approximately 1,000 square foot building to be used as a classroom. The purpose of that classroom is their new environmental studies program, where they would house approximately 100 students who would divide their time between their high school and this location. There are other minor site enhancements to existing pathways and walkways and the installation of new planting material. Students would primarily be transported by bus. That certainly is the intention. We're unaware of any opposition to this amendment. I should say, simply because I can, that this is just a wonderful facility, not just in the Bayside District, but for the entire city. And we're lucky to have them. It's a true jewel, and so the commission is happy to recommend approval to City Council by consent. Thank you, Mr. Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Redmond. Madam Chair, that is all the items on the consent agenda. I move for approval items 1, 3, 5, 8, and 10.
Do we have a second?
Second.
The vote is open.
Mr. Ripley, could we get your vote, please? By a recorded vote of 9-0, agenda items 1, 3, 5, 8, and 10 have been approved by consent.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the applicants that have been here today with a matter on the consent agenda. Those items will now be scheduled on the City Council agenda for hearing. You're welcome to stay, or you can leave if you like. Give just a few minutes for that. Okay, the next order of business will address the remaining items on the agenda. Would the clerk please call the first item?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's agenda item number 2, Michael Carlson, which is an application for a conditional use permit automotive repair garage on property located at 1181 Jensen Drive, located in the Beach District. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative please step to the podium?
Can you state your name for the record?
Michael Carlson.
And can you explain your application to us?
It's for automotive repair. It's going to be by appointment only. We fix just BMWs. It's kind of a specialty shop. We're going to try to keep all the traffic down and the cars out of the way.
Okay. Does any commissioner have any questions for Mr. Carlson?
Oh, I do. So just clarify, so it's just general maintenance, oil changes, air conditioning, suspension repair, brake work?
It's going to be motor swaps as well.
Motor swaps, okay.
Yep.
Tire installation, okay.
Yep.
No, no auto body?
No, sir. No paint, no auto body.
Okay, no auto body, okay.
Any other questions? All right. You'll have an opportunity to rebut. If you call the next speaker, please.
Yes, ma'am, we have one speaker, Craig Blessing.
You just have a seat.
Mr. Blessing? Okay.
Morning, Madam Chair, Commission. My name's Craig Blessing. I'm from the Owls Creek Commerce Center, and I'm here representing our president of the association, Albert Jensen, and we're requesting that the property owner on 1181 Jensen Drive. It's to our understanding that they are operating two different businesses and are applying for one conditional use permit. We feel that this violates the zoning use of I-1 property. As a unit owner, I'm asking to request that the condition number 9 be clarified. Right now, the unit tenant that is located at 1181 Jensen Drive, we believe that he's doing automotive work, and the other is selling wholesale vehicles that are brought in and dropped off. They're currently using two different properties for storing vehicles located on Jensen Drive. One is at a surf shop located at 1171 Jensen Drive, and the other is Caliber Collision located at 1121 Jensen Drive. I've also noticed, as being a property owner, that on the weekends, they work on vehicles outside on the street at night and also on the weekends. They're currently using Caliber Collision for storage at the moment. They're also using other properties as well for storage, and we're asking that the status be changed on Jensen Drive that no vehicles be parked on the street. I also looked up online this morning, Elite Auto Works. They're operating as a limited liability company, and I noticed from the State Corporation Commission that their status has been canceled. So I don't know what that means, so, other than the fact that that's what I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Blessing?
So what are the two businesses that, one of them we know is an application for this?
Correct.
conditional use
There's
permit.
another.
What's the other business and how does it relate?
The other gentleman is operating, they're bringing in BMWs into the facility, and they're just dropping them off. We don't know what they're doing with them other than they're storing them there on two different properties.
Are they side by side or something?
His name is Alexander Bencheko. He's operating Beamer Tech, and I believe they're operating together. But they're operating two different businesses on the same applicant for the what they're doing now is that they're requesting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Maybe we can get the staff to address this,
Okay.
if they know anything, what they know of this.
Do you know any, do you have any other information about that?
Who's the staff?
Yeah.
I would suggest that you hear from the applicant and maybe get some clarification, and then we can see if there might be a zoning violation out there that we need to investigate.
Okay. So, Mr. Carlson, would you come back to the podium, please?
So, as to the other business that's in the same complex, they have their own business, their own lease. They do what they want to do. I'm applying for my own business. I don't have cars parked on the street. I don't have cars stored in a surf shop or Caliber Collision. I have none of what he just came up with. I am my own person. I'm here to apply for myself.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, just
Is Johnson Drive Jensen Drive, is that a private road or is that a public road? It's part of a condominium, right?
It's a whole complex of like
I
industrial.
understand.
I believe it's private.
It is a private road. Mr.
Private
Mayor.
road.
Yes, it is. Just to clarify also, there was a condition that was edited, I believe it's in your reports now, that the vehicles that are scheduled to be repaired for this user is to be parked at the property, at his condo unit,
Yes.
not elsewhere on the property, as we noted during the informal hearing.
Okay, so you're not opposed to that, because he said they were being parked on the street.
I don't
so-
have anything parked on the street. I
Any
can't
oth-
speak for
any-
anybody else, but I don't have anything parked on the street.
All right, any other questions? Anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there no other
Appropriate.
speakers?
No, ma'am.
With no other speakers, let's go ahead and close this, and for discussion amongst the commissioners. Any discussion?
Well, I would just say briefly, I don't know how else we deal with the parking issue other than we have a condition that says you gotta park on site. And then as we discussed this morning, and there's an enforcement issue that goes into that, however that's done. So, I mean, that gentleman indicates he's not parking cars on the street. We have a condition that says you got to park on site. I think that has to be sufficient. So, my thought.
And he indicated he didn't have a relationship with the business next door, so. Any-
Oh, yeah,
okay.
no, just, and, I mean, there are quite a few conditions in here concerning that. Working on the vehicles outside of the business, keeping the vehicles that are in obvious state of disrepair inside the building, the vehicles on site, keep them out of the grassy area, quite a few conditions.
Any other discussion? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move for approval of item number 2.
Second.
Who seconded that?
That was me.
Go ahead.
Vote is open.
Mr. Redmond, could we get, oh, thank you. By a recorded vote of 9-0, agenda item number 2 has been approved.
All right, thank you. Will you call the next item?
Next item is agenda item number 4, Robert and Janet Kotke, an application for a modification of conditions, preschool daycare facility on property located at 2660 West Neck Road in the Princess Anne District. The applicant or the applicant's representative step forward.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Sure, it's Jennifer Cox.
Okay, and can you explain your application?
Sure. Beach Manor Preschool has been there sharing the building that we're talking about with the Tidewater Community Church since 2001. They're no longer sharing the facility with the church. The church is not active anymore. So with that being said, we're trying to increase the occupancy or the conditional use from 100 to 140 students. This would also increase the staff from 15 up to 20. There'll also be some small sign changes out too to show that the church is no longer active.
What are the age of the children that attend the school?
We do from 2, and we can go up to 10. The 10-year-olds are usually just the after-school.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? All right, if you'll have a seat, we'll call you up if there's a rebuttal. Can you call the next speaker?
Yes, ma'am. We have one speaker, Isaac Nathaniel.
Hi, my name's Isaac Nathaniel. I am the neighbor to the school. I live directly across the street from them. They are a fantastic school. My one fear with the increase in the population of their school and the additional staffing is that the additional traffic. The issue that we have during the school year is that Kellam High School is directly across the street. And what we have found is that the Kellam High School students have to park somewhere, which is our neighborhood. So what happens is the entire exterior loop that you see, that becomes on both sides of the street, that becomes a parking lot. So it becomes a one-way street coming in from West Neck. The fear is the corner where you see the retention pond, the corner right there is our bus stop for all the kids. And there's about 11 kindergartners up to elementary school age kids that will stand at that parking or that bus stop. Our fear with the teenage drivers that are coming in there is the security of them and, you know, my kid as well as the value of our home. We're a little worried that if we ever chose to sell our home, the high traffic would be a deterrent. So that was my fear. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Nathaniel?
I do apologize. One other thing, we have been trying to get no parking signs in the community. The city has said that you either do no parking signs in the time frame of the school and it has to be approved by our HOA board. We had 17 approvals and 7 denials because it wasn't up to a certain percentage per our bylaws. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that, and it was one short of being able to. The recommendation that I had was if there's any chance of the areas that were community space that aren't impacting directly by a home, if those could be a no parking spot, that would be helpful because that does impact the bus stop. And it would also help the school as well because that impacts the flow. One thing at the end of the school year, the crossing guard did come up to me and said, please put these the no parking signs in. The traffic at that four-way intersection has gotten crazy because the kids, that's the only place for them to park. So they're all turning in there and it impacts the flow of traffic into the school itself. So
Right,
thank you very much.
Well, maybe we can have somebody on staff that could, maybe help him determine how he could go about getting that.
We will follow up with traffic engineering. I believe that's typically a requirement.
There he is.
Yeah,
Look at that.
I'm talking about-
Popped right up like
He's
that.
the man we talk to.
This guy's good.
In conjunction with this application, is there something that could be done about the parking so that the flow of traffic doesn't become an issue for the residents?
Well, we're talking about something totally separate from this application here.
Okay.
I don't think that this application has anything to do with the students parking in the neighborhood, or the congestion in the neighborhood. We're talking about, an additional 40 children, coming to this school here. So I don't consider that to be relevant to the issue of the school kids parking in the neighborhood. And he is correct, they've come to us for the signage, and like I mentioned earlier, if a neighborhood meets a certain threshold of people that request no parking in the neighborhood, we will put those signs up that say no parking, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have them at Cox High School, First Colonial High School, Green Run. I know the neighborhood behind Kellam has them. But you have to meet a certain threshold of residents that agree that, yes, we want to reduce the we want to eliminate the parking in front of our homes during the day, because it's not just the students, it's the residents as well. Anybody parking on the street can get a ticket. So that's why we hold it to a high threshold of, approval. So they have met with us, they haven't met the requirements, that's where that stands. But I don't think this application really has anything to do with the students parking in the neighborhood. The students parking in the neighborhood, we don't really understand it at all because the amount of parking that they have on site, when they built Kellam, they built it for every junior and every senior to have a spot there. That's what I was told, as long as they pay the parking sticker. So we can't understand why they park in the neighborhood, other than maybe traffic gets so backed up there that instead of trying to turn into the school, they bail into the neighborhood so they can run across the street. That's just, I have no idea, but does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you for providing.
Can I speak to the Kellam High School? They have said that at a certain time period, they stop handing out permits. So the kids that get a license from that point to the end of the year, they have to find a spot to park, and we end up being the parking spot. I know it doesn't apply to this particular permit, but the additional traffic does affect us, unfortunately.
Ron?
I'm just curious, was the church there when you moved there?
It was, yep.
Okay, so you knew the assembly of use was there and
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is not a surprise to you?
No, they've been great neighbors. And this didn't become more of an issue until the other school or other neighborhood put up their no parking signs, and that additional traffic impacted our neighborhood immediately. We had a small amount of kids parking in our neighborhood initially, and then once those signs went up, it blew up, and both sides of the street is full of kids, and it is really difficult now. It's become a one-way street. So I'm worried for them as well as us, because they feel the same way. They've gone to the high school, and we've had this conversation several times. So, thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we can't solve that one for you
Yeah.
today. So, any other questions for this?
One thing, you need to see if you can get your group together and take another vote. If you can get your ratio up a little bit so you can get those signed.
That's the plan. One more vote.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Any other speakers?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so let's close the public hearing and,
Give her a chance to rebut.
oh, I'm sorry. Do you want a chance to rebut anything that he had said?
It doesn't sound like too much of it actually was, obviously our 4-year-olds aren't driving and parking, so I don't know that we're contributing to the parking issue that they're having, but we would like to say if, you know, we have any say, we will be happy to support that community however we can with getting those no parking signs, if there's anything that we can do to help with that as well. So, right.
Okay, so now we'll close the public hearing, and for discussion amongst the commissioners. Yes.
I just think it's a valid request, and I'm glad to see that somebody's taking over the church. Because too often we get churches that when they do church go out of business, that's kind of hard to say, but when churches cease to become a church anymore, it's hard to find what fits in those buildings, and the schools fits very good, and I don't see any problem with this. I think we grant their request.
Any other conversation? Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
You have to hit over.
I need to disclose that the applicant is listed Town Bank as their lender, and I need to disclose I serve on the advisory board in Town Bank in Chesapeake, and have a letter on file with the clerk so stating, and Town Bank's not the applicant, and I have no interest in the application. And the Planning Commission's recommendations are advisory only, and final decisions by City Council. So all that disclosed, I will be voting on the application.
Madam Chair, I'll make the same disclosure as Mr. Ripley just made without repeating it all.
Madam Chair, I do as well with Town Bank.
Okay.
All right, the vote is open now.
By recorded vote of 9-0, agenda item number 4 has been approved.
Thank you. Would you call the next item?
Yes, ma'am. The next item is agenda item 6, Jeffrey and Paige Madrigal. It's an application for a street closure on property located adjacent to 317 45th Street, located in the Beach District. No.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, for the record, Eddie Burdon, Virginia Beach Attorney, representing Paige and Jeff Madrigal, who are here this afternoon, along with Dave Jester, who has also come down in support of this application. Mr. Jester and Mr. Madrigal are prepared to speak. I'll get to that in just a second, in support of the application if need be. Dave is here because he resided in a neighboring property to this for many years, and on your original staff reports, you may have noticed they were revised today, but they showed one house on what was 2 lots that was demolished about 5 years ago, and these 2 houses were built when Mr. Jester lived in the neighborhood. The homeowner of that one house, the shed that you've seen on the pictures, that shed was there then in this current location, been there for probably 20 years. And he was here to, and he's an officer of the Civic League, and it's never been an issue. The shed's never been an issue with anybody as far as he has any recollection or the neighborhood has any recollection. The only reason I think you all planned on putting this on the consent agenda that I'm up here is the last sentence in condition number 2 that suggests that all of the improvements located within the easement area, that's an easement that my clients are in full agreement to dedicate to the city over the 7.5 feet of alley we're proposing to close, but all the improvements would be removed from that easement at that time. We would respectfully request that that be deleted, and then we have the opportunity to pursue an encroachment agreement with the city that will be responsible for moving it if and when the sewer line, which has been there, again, for decades and is never required, even though the shed's been there for decades, that it be removed or anything else be removed in order to maintain it. We're happy to remove anything if there's any need in the future and sign an encroachment agreement, which is what happens with the city. I will also admit and acknowledge, as we discussed, y'all discussed this morning, the shed, the portion of the shed and the little fence wall that is encroaching in the northern half of the alley, which we're not closing and cannot close, those will be relocated so that we will have no encroachment in what will remain the 7.5-foot section of alley belonging to the city. This lane or alley's never been improved. It's been platted for over 100 years, well over. It's not going to be improved as a road. If you've seen the topography, it's a cliff that goes to the north of where these improvements are, straight up, totally heavily vegetated. So, again, both Mr. Jester and Mr. Madrigal were prepared to come up and speak. I got the impression you all were supportive of it, and we appreciate staff and the viewers being in support of it. But we would simply request that the last sentence be deleted from condition number 2. That's an issue that's going to be addressed during the subdivision process, the re-subdivision process, and we would like to have the opportunity to convince the council that with an appropriate encroachment agreement and the relocation of the shed and the portion of the retaining wall out of the northern half of the alley, that we be allowed to have those there, subject to an encroachment agreement that would mandate we remove them if ever and when and ever there's a need to maintain that sewer line that's underground. Be happy to answer any questions any of you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Burdine?
Yeah, why would you want it, I mean, I understand why you want it removed, but why would the city remove it? Because it's stating the fact that it's there, and you're gonna file for an encroachment agreement, I understand, and hopefully that'll work out to the way you want it. But don't they need to state this, that's the way I see it, in the application? I mean, it's a fact, right? It's in the it's encroaching.
It's encroaching. We're going to remove the portion that's encroaching in the north half, and we'll be seeking council's approval for the,
Moving it into the other.
right, yeah, there's a seat, a nice seating area with a fire pit over in this corner. It's all on the property, and we would relocate this so it's on, and this property line would be vacated. That's a whole city process of vacating that property line. And we just, as long as that last sentence is removed, then that provides us with the opportunity to seek to keep the shed after it's relocated, part of it on our, will then be our property, but with an encroachment because the city will have the public utility easement over it. And so if we need to remove it because of them maintaining it, we would be willing to do that.
What if you didn't get the encroachment agreement? What do you do?
Well, we would have no choice but to relocate everything onto the property out that is south of the 7.5 feet we'd be acquiring. And that's ultimately up to city council as to whether they're willing to allow us to do that or not.
Thanks.
But we just didn't want it to be, that door to be closed today. It didn't make to us. It didn't make a lot of sense, and that's the purpose of what Mr. Chester would indicate too. Is stuff's been there for 20 years plus. At least the shed has been there 20 years plus, and it hasn't ever had to be removed, never in anybody's way. But we recognize, and not fussing with the staff at all, but that's what the encroachment process is for, and we have lots of those throughout the city. Encroachment agreements that require, insurance and movement of them, have the encroachment on 30 days' notice. The city wants to get in there and do work, and we're happy to do that.
Yes, sir.
Is what you're saying, that the removal of that sentence doesn't mean you get to leave it there?
Correct.
If you don't get an encroachment.
That's correct.
You know you're encroaching, and you've got to get that.
That's
you
correct,
need
but
to
with
put
that sentence, it
it's not
cuts, close that door.
It's just not necessary.
Correct. That's I'm just asking that one sentence be removed, not trying to trick anybody. We would be pursuing an encroachment agreement. And again, my client and Mr. Jester, if I read you all correctly this morning, they don't need to waste your time speaking if you all are going to approve it with that change.
Can staff offer an option to Mr. Burdine and his clients? Instead of removing the sentence, can we add, or an encroachment shall be granted, or an encroachment,
Unless an encroachment is granted, that's fine.
unless an encroachment is granted by city council? We do find value in the condition still being there, to reinforce the fact that it does need to be removed through the process. Mr. Burdine is correct. It will have to be removed anyway, but there's still value to the condition, but we would just add in the fact that he can still obtain an encroachment if necessary.
And also to be very clear, we understand that it cannot remain in the northern half of the alley. We have no rights to have it in that section of the alley. But all I'm doing is wanting on the record that I don't want to come up and say we agree the conditions, and that basically would close the door. We just want to be in a position to pursue.
So you're agreeable with the
Sure,
addition?
as
to
long
the
as,
fence?
as long as you added the condition that, or an encroachment is approved. Sure, that's fine too. Thank you, Mr. Tom. Thank you.
And the next speaker?
There are no speakers.
There are no other speakers? All right, we'll close this public hearing and open it up to discussion among the commissioners. You had your,
I'd make a motion to approve the application subject to adding to the end of the last sentence in condition number 2, unless an encroachment agreement is reached with city council.
Second.
second? The vote is open.
By a recorded vote of 9-0, agenda item number 6 has been approved with condition as amended.
All right, thank you. You will call the next item, please?
Yes, ma'am. It is agenda item number 9, T&S Lawn and Landscaping LLC, an application for a conditional use permit, a bulk storage yard on property located at 400 Davis Street in the Kempsville District. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative please step forward?
Can you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Stephen Ferguson.
Can you go ahead and let us know about your application?
The application for the conditional use permit is, as TNS, we're going to install a new building there where the house was demolished on the Davis Street side, and we're going to lease this out to a landscape company, not TNS, a different landscape company. And we've agreed with, I guess during this informal meeting this morning, they have eliminated the landscaping on the lot 23 and the 27 side, but wanted us to put new new fence there. Is that correct? And I have a question on why new fence there, because there's fence there currently, would be one of my questions. And other than that, I can agree with the landscaping on the lot 28 side, and we already agreed to landscaping where the gate is. So I just have a question on why you would require me to take a fence that's currently there and replace it, because it's a solid wood fence now. And then the fence along, if you can go back one slide, that'd be awesome. The lot 23 side, there's an existing chain link fence there that, the building next to us is a, mechanic repair store, mechanic repair shop. It's an old fire station that currently has a chain link fence there now. And for us to put a fence right up against the fence doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. And there's building on that side, most of that side anywhere, and it's not visible. You can't visibly see in that side of the yard from any part of the street. So I would ask that we recommend not putting a new fence on the back and keeping the existing chain link fence on the, according to that picture, on the right side.
Questions?
We rode out there last week and looked at it, okay? And we'd like to see things cleaned up. You're not the only one that this happens to. Other, if you're gonna go to a bulk storage yard, this happens to other people too. But I thought we were being fair about taking away the class 5 landscaping or 6 landscaping part of that because of the fact that there's something there already. There's an easement ditch behind on the east side. And to keep the fence from coming all the way into the garage door, so it wouldn't block the garage door for them to cut out. So we thought about that also. And I think it's fair what we've asked to do, instead of having you landscape also, just to replace the fence, because it needs to be cleaned up a little bit.
Okay, so we're talking about replacing this fence.
That's right. But no landscaping there, can back right up to the easement to where
Okay.
well, I'm saying that correctly, right, Bobby? The property line, because there's a drainage ditch back there. The east fence.
It was my understanding with the commission that you wanted a 6-foot solid fence all the way around the property.
Correct.
And then the landscaping to be facing Davis Street
Right here,
and the north side
this
Correct.
side.
That's right.
there.
And that's,
Oh,
yes.
I'm in agreement with all that. I'm happy that y'all made that change.
Okay.
And I'd be more than happy that this side moved the fence, or, you know.
It doesn't
and
have to
put
come in
the-
all 6 feet. Just enough to put the not so it doesn't block the door. We agreed to that also.
Okay,
Because we don't want the door to be blocked, that way you won't have access out of the building.
exactly. Thank you. But we're going to be cleaning up the site. We're going through the plans review, stormwater and everything else to get the other building. So, you know, the cleanup of the whole thing, we're taking down some trees. So the property is getting cleaned up 100%. And that back fence would be getting repaired if I can have y'all, that we would repair anything missing in that fence instead of replacement.
Well, instead of having you a new fence and landscaping, we're taking the landscaping away. So
Okay.
we are taking a lot away from making you do that.
Okay, and then putting a fence here, as I understand it, you want me to put a 6-foot solid fence here too, against another fence.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other fence that's there?
Chain link.
It's a
That's
chain link fence. And building, like there's building to here, and then it's only chain link fence in the back. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that building that's there.
I think part of the purpose of that is so that what's in the storage area is not visible from the neighbors. And that's why they're asking for a solid fence.
Yeah, the nature of it's bulk storage, and the idea is that you to allow it in this area, it'll be screened so people don't see what's being stored inside there. So that's the whole idea. So, yeah, the idea of not having to landscape a couple of those areas seems like that's a practical thing to do. And I see what you're saying about your chain link fence, but we still want the visual blockage. So it could probably run up to the building.
Okay.
If that gets you what you need. You know,
Okay.
that would work, I would think. Because
Instead of going all the way
no
down the
reason to
property
run,
line?
no reason to run the fence next to the building.
Okay,
It's right on the property line, isn't it?
yes, sir. There's about 9 inches, I think, there.
You can tie into it somehow.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, me and the neighbor have, as far as I know, a pretty good relationship, so.
Yeah.
So I would be in agreement with that. I can do that.
Okay. Good with
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker?
There are no speakers, ma'am.
Okay. Since there are no other speakers, we'll close this public hearing and open it up to comments from the commission.
Yeah, I just think it provides consistency in the quality of the materials and complete screening around the bulk storage, aspect of the property. So I certainly concur with what's been discussed.
Did we have to change those conditions?
Yes, I think we need to go ahead and clean that up. Ms. Smith, do you have a proposal?
Yes, I believe it's been handed out to you.
It doesn't exactly reflect what you said. So
It doesn't, can I see it?
the condition should read that a 6-foot solid fence shall be installed along the perimeter of the property with category 6 landscaping to be installed on the western and northern portions of the property line as depicted on the plan. Is that correct, Ms. Smith?
But this doesn't say anything.
I know that doesn't say that, that's why I'm
So
trying to clarify.
it says that
Right.
category 6 is required everywhere except
Oh, with
along
the
the eastern and the southern, where all you have to do is a
Okay.
the 6-foot pipe.
solid fence.
Solid fence.
I missed that exception word.
The eastern and the southern.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Are you looking what I'm looking at?
Yes, I'm looking
Okay.
at it.
It may be able to be wordsmithed more clearly, and we can work on that. As long as we all agree to the concept, we'll figure out the correct language for
I think
you.
it's fine.
Any questions about that?
I think it's fine.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move for approval of the item with the changes to the condition number 1.
And do I have a second?
I'll second, and I also need to disclose, again, the same information about the town bank that I disclosed in item number 4 applies here too.
Okay.
Likewise, I make the disclosure
Likewise.
about town.
So we have ditto and ditto. huh?
Ditto, okay.
The vote is open.
By a recorded vote of 9-0, agenda item number 9 has been approved with condition as amended.
Would you call the next item, please?
Yes, ma'am. The next agenda item is D1, Virginia Beach Digiports LLC. It's an application for a conditional rezoning, AG1 and AG2 agricultural districts to conditional I1 light industrial on property located at 2097 Harpers Road in the Beach District. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative please step forward?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of Planning Commission. My name is Randy Royal with Kimley Horn Associates, Virginia Beach Address. I'm the agent representing Virginia Beach Digiports on this application. Rezoning AG1, AG2 to conditional I1 light industrial for a data center. The property, I think you heard a little bit in the pre-briefing this morning, is severely encumbered with a Navy restrictive easement. There's only certain uses that can go in there. This is one of them that is allowed. It is a good use. I'll speak to that a little more here in a minute. And then we have a letter from the Navy approving this use. It's actually located in a special economic growth area 3, South Oceana. High noise zone, it's 75 decibels or higher in there, but it is compatible with ACUS. The parcel itself, can you put the site plan there? There you go. The parcel itself, the proposed 2-story building, that's about 10 acres. I'm going to get into storm drainage in a minute, but we've got like a 6-acre pond, which is about 3 times what we would normally have on a site. And then we've got the road itself, all of which is being rezoned. That's the 19 acres that we're talking about. It's really 10 acres of development, but we've got 19 acres total, as we were directed by staff to do. So we have met with the community way back when. We've suffered some delays due to some land negotiations and other issues, but we met with them February 7th at Corporate Landing Elementary School. There were 50 people or so there. We answered all the questions at that time. However, I met with 3 of the citizens this past Friday, and they said they would like to have another community meeting, which I agreed to do, but I'm hopeful that we can get a recommendation out of you today, because delaying will cause us to go to October for Planning Commission, November City Council. My client is here, he'll speak to it, but he's already lost a couple of deals due to timing, and we need to keep moving these things forward. The data centers have to have clients in there, and they move very quickly and require us to move quickly. Storm drainage. You heard from DSC this morning. There's to be no impact downstream nor upstream. I think one of you asked in the drainage questions, are we impacting the rest of the site, which, by the way, is 335 acres. Taylor Farm total is 800, but we're dealing with Linda Chapel, who owns 335 acres. But we have to look at that as part of the storm drainage as we're considering this property. The review itself, I wanted to clarify that. Public Works has put forth new standards, very restrictive standards, looking, Mr. Barnes, specifically at areas like southern Virginia Beach, looking at things that they have not been adopted yet. However, with rezonings, we have to use those much higher standards. They probably will be adopted, but there's a lot of vetting, there's a lot of discussion before that happens. This project and any rezoning that you hear, staff will make us use those much, much higher standards. So, and again, answering a question, that pond typically would have been in the 12 to 15% range. I've been doing this for 40 years. That's about what it would be. It's in the 45% range with these new requirements. We're looking at sea level rise. We're looking at wind-blown tides. We're looking at groundwater flow. All of that is coming into play on this. Mr. Barnes, again, and I don't mean to address specifically, but I sympathize with you. I'm working with Public Works. We are looking at.
I only know what I know.
Well, we're looking at those flooding problems, and respectfully, Asheville Park had a lot of problems with the design. And I'm sorry that you're downstream from that, but that's a particular problem. But we're looking at all the flooding
I'm
problems.
downstream of this too.
Well, but this is not going to have the impacts. It's not going to have the mistake in design that Asheville Park
Is it
did.
going to have any impact?
No, sir.
None.
No, sir. That's the high standard
Would you like
that,
to bet on that?
Yeah.
from a engineering standpoint, yes, sir.
You personally?
Sir, I can tell you the professional engineering aspect of it. We have taken the model from the city, the PC swim model, and been held to very, very high standards to show zero impact. That's all we can depend on now.
I know.
And I'm sorry to engage. I didn't mean to do that. I apologize. The other aspect of storm drainage, and you're probably going to hear from some of the citizens here, you've seen some pictures. Ms. Bookhold addressed one of them, the May of 2018 flooding of Dam Neck Road. That was an intense storm, but over and above the intensity, the pipes were clogged. Once they unclogged the pipes, as you heard Ms. Bookhold say, they haven't had any more requests for service out there. I'm not saying there might have been some water backup, but nothing like the pictures you saw. Other pictures that I've seen from the citizens, quite frankly, are from September of 2016, which is Tropical Storm Julia. Probably a 100-year storm, if not more, probably a 200-year storm. A couple weeks after that was Hurricane Matthew on October 8th. That was like a 500-year storm. We don't design for that. You're going to have flooding during those scenarios. This is a 10-acre site with a 6-acre pond and a 3-acre roadway that we're going to be required to have zero impact downstream. That's absolutely, they put us through the ringer on that. Traffic, I've heard an issue with traffic. Dam Neck Road is, I'm not sure what the level of service, but it's pretty high. Because capacity is 35,000, there's currently about 20,000 ADT on it. Harper's Road has capacity, but it is too narrow. Traffic engineer is here, he'll tell you they do not want us accessing Harper Road. Too narrow, don't want to put the traffic on there. We do show an access on the site plan, but it's gated, it's locked, it's an emergency access, only for the firemen to get in there. So we come out there. I understand Dam Neck Road is 55 miles an hour, and there may be some borrow pit trucks that come out. That's not what we have. We have 20, 25 employees. There's going to be nominal impact on traffic out there. Noise, you may hear about that. Typically, data centers are quiet. This is not a Bitcoin. We've talked about that before. Not the Bitcoin that is very loud. It is a data center. Very, very quiet, other than the backup generators that are tested once a month, once every couple of weeks. Those backup generators typically have shielding on them, in addition to a wall around them. So the noise that you get out of them with the shielding and with the wall at the edge of the property is about 55 decibels. 65 decibels is me talking to you from about 3 feet away. 55 is nominal noise. 3 big neighborhoods I've looked at the map are Prince George Estates, that's over 2,000 feet away, beyond the 55 decibels. Lake Placid, over 4,000 feet away. Red Mill, over 7,000 feet away. Noise should not be an issue. We've got a great opportunity in Virginia Beach. Subsea cables are coming in here. We need to capitalize on it. Capitalizing on it is putting the data centers for the subsea cables to come into. You might say, well, you're only creating 20 jobs. There's still economic impact. And the spinoff is so many businesses want to be near the data centers. The milliseconds difference being closer can be a huge financial gain to these businesses. So the businesses are going to come. We've already had some of these leapfrog to Northern Virginia, to Richmond. We need to be prepared to get these. And again, my client has somebody now, and we don't want to lose that client, or they'll go elsewhere again. So again, I'm prepared to address anything and everything that's thrown out there. I think I addressed the big issues for you. Staff has recommended a positive recommendation. I hope you'll see fit to do the same. We're absolutely committed to meeting with the neighbors again, but we're hopeful that you can move us forward, and we will meet with the neighbors before we go to City Council. So I'll stand by for questions unless you have some now.
Any questions?
Okay.
Dave?
Mr. Royal, you and I both, I see you all the time at the Development Authority meetings, and that was my first exposure to this operation. Would you describe how this is, not just this facility, but this function and the cables are viewed by our economic developers and the folks who are charged with trying to grow our income and jobs and all the rest of it?
I'll do my best, and Ray White from Economic Development is here. He's going to speak to you about it also.
Okay.
But as I said, we've got these transatlantic cables coming in from all kinds of countries, and it's putting the data out. Right now, literally, the cloud, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure if y'all do either, but
I do.
the cloud where everything goes is up in Northern Virginia. For whatever reason, I mean, knock on wood, it's great. They've decided to put the subsea cables into Virginia Beach. They go up in New York, they go down in Florida. They were looking for another midpoint. So we've got a great opportunity to connect those up, but we've got to have the data centers to send the information out. The fiber that we're talking about running around the area is going to connect up with that. Everything's going to work better. Businesses are going to want to locate here, and we're right at the hub with the subsea cable. So that's the big opportunity.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Mike?
Randy, if you could hit the high spots of the, beyond the fact that the BMP is much larger than it would have been several years ago. What other features are there to the stormwater management that's different or better than what would have been done before these new regulations came?
Honestly, it's a lot more intense review. As I said, it's called PC SWIM. That's a model that's used where you look at everything all the way downstream. Previously, and like I said, I've been doing it a long time, you just can't, well, actually back in the old days, you just dump it all out on the road. You didn't do anything. Previously, you've held back to pre-development levels. You didn't look so much all the way downstream. If you held back to your pre-development levels, your peak flows, you're okay. Now, no, we have to look at the storm comes in, the water surges up, the water surges down. We have to look at the timing of that to make sure that the timing of ours doesn't exacerbate the problem. So we look all the way downstream, not just in our area there, all the way to the outfall to make sure that we don't have an issue. And again, DSC puts us through a rigorous review.
Anything else? Yes, Jack.
What have you looked at, I've seen like an overall development plan for the area for, that Venture Realty's kind of put together. Have you coordinated with anybody on your site? I mean, is it, in terms of a larger, bigger picture?
We
for
have
this
looked
area?
at what stormwater flows are coming through there now. We haven't considered anything as developed. It's going to have to stand on its own. It's going to have to work on its own. It may go past our site, and what's coming past our site now will continue to come past our site, but if and when the rest of that develops, it will have to stand on its own, and all this will have to be worked out again.
Okay.
Anything else? All right,
Thank you.
I'll call the first speaker.
Yes, ma'am, we have 11 speakers. Eddie Bourdon and then Louis Shaddle.
Madam Chair, Commission members, I'm up here before you today in support of this application. I'm the managing member of Paul Brown Family LLC, the owner of 140 acres of farmland that has been split up over the years by roads. We are on the north and south side of Dam Neck Road, the east and west side of London Bridge Road, and the east and west side of Harper's Road. The Taylor Farm property is just to the northeast of our property. And like Steve Barnes, this property, most of this property has been in my family since the 1800s. It's been farmed. We've never had any flooding issues other than the extremely large, I think it's probably as big a ditch as we have in the city of Virginia Beach, that runs from Oceana across and through Linda's property, and our property runs down the east side of Harper's Road that drains a substantial portion of NAS Oceana, and I'll get to that in a minute. We support the economic opportunity that this presents, and that the initiative that the city council took to bring the cables here represent the revenues to the city, the opportunity economically, jobs is very important to the city to address the needs that the city has, and one of which is stormwater. What Steve Barnes talked about this morning with regard to the southern end of the city, I could not be more sympathetic towards and in agreement with him on, and I can tell you the Green Ribbon Committee has talked about this extensively. Both Ms. Henley and Al Henley, not related, are on this, and I hope we can get somewhere with it. What Randy Roll just said has never been more true. We've never, ever had the level of information from all the studies that have been done about stormwater, nor the stringent regulations on how we deal with stormwater like we have today. And I would hesitate to guess that we have the most stringent stormwater analysis and coverage of new development of any of the myriad of jurisdictions in northeastern North Carolina, Chesapeake, Suffolk, et cetera, that all drain into the same watershed, the Sound. And that's where the issue arises. As again, Steve couldn't have been more eloquent in what he had to say this morning, and he's correct. But we aren't in a vacuum. You know, there are a whole lot of other places that put water into that Sound. And as Randy has indicated, what we have to do today exceeds anything that's ever been done in the past, and it exceeds what's being done in these other jurisdictions. We have to continue to have commerce. We have to continue to expand our tax base to pay for the things that we will need to do. Last thing I'm going to say, NAS Oceana, all their stormwater, they're not subject to any of these rules and regulations. They don't have BMPs. That big ditch I'm talking about, that is the only time we've ever had any flooding issues, is stormwater. It drains Oceana, okay? Now, I'm not here to, I love Oceana. We're not here to throw them under the bus. But when you all heard this morning in the briefing about the comp plan about some cooperation, and Oceana doesn't want ponds out there because they don't want the birds. But they get rid of their water immediately. They don't have any underground storage. They don't have any of that. They don't have to play by the rules that we have to play by, federal government. That's where there's a ton of water coming off Oceana. Not all of it goes south, but a lot of it does. And it comes right through here, right through these properties in a humongous ditch. And it goes into the North Landing River eventually, West Neck Creek. That's where it all goes. Oceana wasn't high and dry land when it was created and when it expanded over the years. A lot of it was filled. A lot of it was low, okay? So understand it's not a simple fix. Again, I totally sympathize with Steve and what he's saying. It needs to be addressed, but we can't do it alone, and we can't shut off economic development. We have to be smarter about it, and I think staff and all the money that council has spent on these studies has put us in a position to be smarter about it. And I'll sit down and shut up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, next speaker.
Louis Shadley, and then Raymond White.
Madam
Can you
Chairman.
state your name for the record, please?
Name is Louis Shadle. I'm the Managing Director of Virginia Beach Digiports, so I'm effectively the master developer of this project. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on a couple points that Randy had made about subsea cables, and then I'd also like to talk a little bit about the economic impact of data centers to this region, one of the reasons why I'm here. The subsea cables that come into Virginia Beach came in for a single purpose, and it was because the operators, the undersea cable operators, wanted to get away from the congestion points, the choke points in New York and New Jersey, and also in southern Florida. All of those cables are in a position where they can be dragged by a single trawler And so coming into the Mid-Atlantic region was a diversity play, a resiliency play for those operators. We have lost a couple of opportunities in Virginia Beach because we don't have enough data center infrastructure here. The 3 subsea cables, 2 that are currently operating now, and another one that's coming in from Saint-Hilaire, France, the Donant cable from Google, are coming into Virginia Beach, and they're not stopping here. They're going straight to Northern Virginia, or they're going down to Boynton, Virginia. As I had described with somebody one time, if you think about these subsea cables as being like a water pipe that comes across the Atlantic Ocean, they come through Virginia Beach, and there's no spigot in Virginia Beach. There's no spigot in Virginia Beach. None of that data that comes in here terminates in Virginia Beach. It goes to Ashburn, Virginia, or down to the Microsoft data center down in Boynton, Virginia. What I'm trying to create here is a destination for the data, to create a data center park that is a place where data is originated, housed, stored, processed, and disseminated. That is what the promise of data centers in Virginia Beach is. And the economic impact of that is it creates a 365-day economy. So it helps to eliminate the limitations of a seasonal economy that Virginia Beach currently has. Now, as far as a direct impact, data centers, according to a couple of studies by Google, for every single employee in a data center, there are 5 employees that are indirect as part of the ecosystem that are supporting the services that are being delivered in the data center. These are the definitive reports that we can look up and call upon. A Northern Virginia Technology Council study that I actually was a co-sponsor of a few years back indicated that for every dollar of investment in a data center, there's a $9.5 return on the investment. Data centers are one of the highest returns on investment types of commercial business that you can possibly have. In comparison with, let's say, for instance, a light industry, which would deliver $1.57 back instead of $9.50. And if it was a residential community, the community loses money. The data centers are very, very low on impact to the community.
Okay, sir, your time is just is up here, so. if
Yes,
you
ma'am.
could
So I'll
wrap
just
up.
pause right there and ask if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll sit down.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
We're good.
very
Thank you.
much.
Raymond White, and then Dave Pazuski.
Thank you. Can you state your name for the record?
Good afternoon, I'm Raymond White. I'm Business Development Coordinator for the Department of Economic Development here in Virginia Beach. We've been working with Mr. Sladle, his group, for several years on this project. When we first learned that transatlantic cable was coming into Virginia Beach, his organization was one of the first that had met with us. Since then, we've been working, obviously, to get the second cable here, and the third one he mentions also on the way. One of our initiatives through economic development and targeted industries is the data center, transatlantic cable industry. As you probably are aware, there are several facilities that have already been built nearby this location. One of them just broke ground the other day. We feel the jobs that'll bring in are technical jobs, IT-related jobs, technicians and engineers, and the spin-off effect that Mr. Sladle also said was certainly going to help our community. We feel, along with the data centers, if we get enough inertia within those, that there could very well be a second wave of opportunity that could bring companies that need the very super speed cables to be located very nearby. So rather than go up to Northern Virginia or go out of our area, we think there could be a second wave of companies that could come right behind the data centers. So with that, economic development does support this project. It is part of the initiative that we have had underway for several years and that City Council is very aware of, and we look forward to this project moving forward. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. White? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker?
Dave Pazuski, and then Don Nelson.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Committee, hello.
You need to state your name for the the record, please.
Dave Pozeski. The best way to describe this is a very interesting project that is extremely massive while being extremely limited in detail. And what do I mean? If you look at that, it looks like a small project, but this is just the beginning of an 800-acre project. This is not the end. This is the beginning. Now, I have lived at 1308 Eaglewood Drive. I'm the first person that ever lived in the 1300 block of Eaglewood. I live at the last house. The person who will be speaking after me moved in 2 hours later. So we're living there 35 years. I don't know a whole lot about models and impact studies and all these other things that people are talking about. But I can tell you, I don't know about these once-in-a-lifetime storms that only flood once in a lifetime. I live there. I see the flooding. I see what you've done at Oceana. You've built a Dunkin' Donuts. You're building the process of a strip mall there. You've built storage units. Oceana floods when there's 1 inch of rain. They're talking about not wanting to put it on Harper's Road. There's a reason they don't want it on Harper's Road. It floods. And Dam Neck floods all the time. So to hear this once-in-a-lifetime storm that people are talking about, I've lived there. I've seen it. I live with it and I deal with it. And what nobody's telling you is about the huge pit that's back there. There's a massive pit back there that has to be filled in. With what type of soil? What type of guarantee? It's nice that all these studies and models are here, but what happens when these people live and this is built and I'm now walking in my knees up to water to go to 7-Eleven? Nobody's addressing that. We have a massive flooding problem there, massive, and it's getting worse every time it rains. I'd also like to say that we're also hearing about the impact and all the money it's going to bring to Virginia Beach. Nobody once has said, what's it going to cost us? Nobody once has said, how much is Virginia Beach giving for this? People talk about meeting with the neighbors. There's never been a meeting set up. Now there is after the fact. You heard Mr. Royal say, oh, we're going to have another one, so please approve this first. Well, that's like, you know, why would you approve something before you know the facts? And they're asking for something that is extremely limited in detail for what they're asking you to do. And as far as, I do want to clarify one thing. Like I said, I live there. They're talking about, I believe somebody said Lake Placid was 7,000 feet away, and Red Wing was, and Lake Placid's 4,000. No, it's not even close. I don't know where these figures are coming from or who's doing this geography, but we're nowhere near twice as far away as Lake Placid. So,
Your time is up.
yeah, okay. I just ask that you defer it versus approve it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? I have one question for you, sir. Can you pull up a map so that we can, I'd like to know where you live in relationship to where this project is.
Well, with the way that that is done, it's very hard to say, but I will try to point it to you as best I can.
Okay, there's a pointer right there on the podium.
Here? I'm not very technologically savvy, so you're gonna.
You need to pick it up.
Oh, this?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you just pushed the button, sorry. Where am I pointing? Am I anywhere on the map? I can't see where I am. I'm colorblind.
Okay.
So I can't. It's probably, see where the thing shaping out is, where it bows to the right? The little upper right corner. See, it's in that area in there, where the wooded area is. See, they're going to be, we're taking, what we're doing is we're taking out a massive amount of trees everywhere, and that's what's causing the flooding. You're taking them out at Oceana, you're taking them out over here and everywhere, and there's also going to be another one built on the other side of Corporate Landing. So this is just the beginning.
You're up off of Harper's Road?
No. Where the mark is to the far right mark, if you come down, there's a little subdivision in there, and I live in there in that treed area.
Okay.
More than likely, from what I can see. It's a very poor map for detail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dawn Nelson and then Christine Friend.
State your
Chairman,
name for the record.
my name's Don Nelson, and I live at 1304 Eaglewood Drive, which is pretty much close to my neighbor Dave. What I'm concerned with is, and I think some of the board member are dealing with a well-thought-out plan, that there's unintended consequences to, you know, here they're going to build something with no impact at all. And, you know, I don't believe that at all. I truly believe that this is going to be the first of many other buildings, because if this works, they're going to want to keep building more. And what the previous gentleman said is the Atlantic cable's like a pipeline. And I go, well, I believe that, and it's going to be dumping water right in my front yard. I mean, the water we've never had flooding that, like we're having it now. And people, well, you know, you get an engineering study that says, well, you know, either that shouldn't happen or it'll never happen again for the next 500 years. So what, you know, and if they're concerned about milliseconds and microseconds, there's an industrial park right across the street over in Dam Neck that's even closer to the undersea cable than where they're building it right now. So I don't think they're really concerned about the speed or anything like that. I don't know why they want to build it there, but the more trees you take out, and to say that there's not going to be any flooding because of it, there's going to be a big hurricane, and, you know, the pumps are going to go out, and it's going to be, oh, well, this is 10 times worse than what we ever expected. And, you know, it's going to make it that much worse for the people who live there. And that's my primary concern. And another thing is, like, an unintended consequence is that the church builds a school, and, you know, the next thing you know, all the kids from the high school are parking over there. Did any engineer come up with that was going to happen? No. And with that, you know, as far as parking around there and what'll happen as these stages and where the construction workers are going to have to park, you know, I just don't see it looking good for our neighborhood at all. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions for Mr. White, or Mr. Nelson? Okay, thank you, sir.
Christine Friend, and then Mary Beth Ruger.
I'm sorry, Rona. If you wouldn't do that, hand them to me.
She told me to do that.
Hand them to me, thank you. I will, thank you.
Can you state your name for the record?
Christine French.
French?
French, like the language.
Good.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. All of you should have received an email in the packet, and here's a handout I also made. I'm a resident of Red Wing subdivision, which currently sits east of the proposed rezoning. I'm opposed to this rezoning, have several concerns, the most important being flooding. The parcel of land where the proposed development will be is consistently saturated with water after it rains. The ditch on Harper's Road will hold water for 2 to 5 days after a normal rain. The proposed rezoning is part of the southern watershed, which drains into the West Neck Creek and is already at its capacity. Until the city fixes stormwater issues that we already have in that area, I don't feel that this is something that needs to be rushed into. The developer has informed us that the BMP on this property is going to drain into the ditches of Harper's Road. And we do not need to add something there where there's already a problem. The flooding on Dam Neck Road between Corporate and Landing already exists. I feel this development is just going to add to the problem. The storm drains on Dam Neck are either covered or closed. When I took pictures, which you guys had in the email, I took those pictures in April and May of 2019. And there's debris, there's lawn clippings, there's everything else that completely cover the drains. Our subdivision is one of the highest elevations in Virginia Beach, yet last year when we had a heavy rain, my yard flooded, the neighbor's yard flooded, our drainage ditches around the subdivision were also flooded. So if we keep allowing the development to continue, what's going to happen to people like us? Are we going to be the next Asheville Park or Windsor Woods? I understand that this rezoning is only for 19.38 acres, but the overall concept of what they want to build here is going to encompass over 600 acres, and it will literally be at my back door. So there again is concern about flooding and what it's going to do to our property values. Right now, one of the selling points is our home, is that we're in a quiet little neighborhood. How much is that is going to change? My next concern I have is our subdivision only has one way in and one way out. The development around our subdivision have totally encroached us into our own subdivision. This parcel of land is the last vacant property that has not been developed. Once it's developed, we will be completely surrounded by various developments, and we're already concerned that if there's a medical emergency in our subdivision, we're 1 mile back off General Booth. How do we get emergency vehicles in and out? There has been very little community engagement on this. The only notices that went out about this were through social media. So if people were not on social media, they didn't even know that there was anything. Mr. Royal said he would set something up. I'm asking you guys to either deny or defer. That's
And
it.
can you show me there where you live?
2 doors down from them. Here's the school, so we are right here where your map ends. Right there. Same thing, see Larkview Drive over here? That's us. That's our subdivision.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
I'm just curious, what other use would you see appropriate here? I mean,
I
Tell me,
understand that
it's
it's
a-
private property,
and it's in an ACU zone, so it's restricted.
right,
So what else, what other use would you see here?
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Beth Ruger and then Rona Marsh.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Beth Ruger. I'm not here to take up a lot of your time, but I oppose this basically because it's an underdeveloped section of Virginia Beach, our area, and it hasn't had a chance to reach its potential for flooding. It's already flooding now, and Pungo and all that area by me, Sandbridge Road area, is flooding to the point where no one can fix it. So how could they fix London Bridge Road flooding if they haven't fixed it now? What's more heavy buildings and taking trees down and wildlife dying and coming into our neighborhoods gonna do? I just don't feel like we should junk up a beautiful area with industry and industrial plants and put it in another area, like a city or something, not in a nice, beautiful community as Virginia Beach. They're starting to build Wawa now. So when Wawa's built and they add more building to the beach, what's it gonna do with that there? And I had no idea there was the piping. I'd never even heard about this piping till recently, going under the water. That's gonna affect wildlife, sea life also. So I'm just against all this that I see. It's like Fern Gully or the Lorax to me. And also the schools. We have several schools that are going from 6:30 in the morning to 4:15 in the afternoon. There's constant motion with these buses, and I work with the schools, so I get concerned about it. But the flooding and the traffic and the accidents are increasing, and I just don't think this is good for this section of the beach at all. So that's all I have to say. But thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Ruger? All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Rona Marsh and then Melanie Marino.
Before you start my time, does Dave Redmond have to be here, or does he get to leave when all the people opposed to it are speaking? I'm really kind of taken aback that he left in the middle of Ms. Ms. French, and then this other lady. I mean, are we not all gonna be heard by all the commissioners? Is he not gonna vote? If he's not gonna vote, then it doesn't matter. But I don't think I've ever been to a public meeting, other than Mayor Sessoms, who was recusing himself because of the town bank, left in the middle. You know, if he's taking a bathroom break, I understand that. But I really think he should hear me, because I think he's very much in contact with Mr. Coker, who I think has been a one-man whirlwind for himself for whatever reason about this development. And I really think Mr. Redmond needs to hear me. So I'd rather wait a moment until he comes back, unless you
wanna
want me to
change
have
the
extra
speakers?
time.
Okay.
Is it switch the order of the speakers?
Okay. Melanie Marino?
So you may want him to hear her too, because he's pretty pro-citizens as well, but maybe not so much.
You can state
Good
your name for the
afternoon.
record, please.
My name is Melanie Marino. I'm in opposition of this build, specifically related to the verbiage that was chosen by the staff evaluation. I'm really concerned that this build is in the southern watershed, and it will absolutely affect downstream. And the reason we know that is because we cannot predict the future. This build is reviewed by the staff as having potential to successfully comply with stormwater regulations. But our citizens of the city have donated our tax dollars in confidence of our city council to have studies done that will ensure that our city is resilient against stormwater, against seawater rise. And those values have not been put out in such a way that the city council can now have ordinances that reflect that data. There's no room for error here. I'm really asking of the Planning Commission to make a precedent decision. We understand the value of this data center. I use the internet. My children love their iPads. But there's no reason to rush through something if we've spent all this money to get the science. Let's get the stormwater values back appropriately. Let's institute those values into the ordinances that are required to run our city in a resilient manner for the future. I ask that of you today. This data center is going to have 170,000 square feet of non-porous surface. The square footage of the maintenance yard is 31,500. I see nothing written here of an attempt to make a non-porous surface in that maintenance yard. I see no verbiage here that reflects absolute confidence, or I want to see verbiage as a citizen that says that this build exceeds expectations. I want to see verbiage here that says there will be no harm downstream or upstream with the most current data and engineering solutions. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Morano? All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The next speaker?
Rona Marsh, and then Mark Johnson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Mrs. R.M. Rana Marsh. You have emails from me, and I gave you a handout today. I am here to speak about the Department of Defense Joint Land Use Study. I think before we rush into this, we need to seriously understand that the Navy, the Department of Defense, is our biggest employer. I don't think anyone here would like it if we put that at risk. Those are thousands of jobs, and I mean thousands of jobs. My husband currently is on a naval vessel, and I don't think it would be good for any of us if we live in this economy and depend on that to put that at risk for, 25 jobs at a data center. I'm not convinced this is the best location for the data center. I have no problem with data centers, but what about London Bridge? What about some area that doesn't go through where the Joint Land Use Study has identified as an area that floods? On August 13, I went to this meeting. I sat there for 2 hours. There were many very important people there. If you didn't get to the meeting, oh well, there's information about it online, and there's also a news story covering it, and I sent you all a link while we were in this meeting. The biggest problem I have is when they started talking about this data center, it was going to be 107,000 square feet. I don't know what happened between February and now, but we have gone up 63,000 square feet in impervious surface. Whoa, 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 whoa. To me, that's over 55%. We are now at 170,000 square feet, okay? Anybody do math, you figure it out. We need to have community engagement. There were a few people in February that were asked about 107,000 square feet. They were not asked about 170,000 square feet. And you talk about your letter from the commander, that letter came from him approving it on 11 February of 19. And it says, be aware that our determination is based on the representation of the use and location of the property. So you changed the location on the property and you changed the representation. You went from 106,000 square feet to 107,000 square feet to 170,000 square feet. My biggest concern is your comprehensive plan. Thank you, Bobby Tejan, for putting this out. Today couldn't have been a better day to get this. This is the document we should be correlating with. Not only should we look at Dewberry, but we should get the community involvement on this, because you have in here that you want people to be focused on stormwater, flooding, and sea level rise, and it will launch and include extensive public input regarding 10,000 citizen contacts. We need that. We need to defer this. We need to get people informed that this is going on. It shouldn't be backdoored and pushed through. Let's take a breath. Let's figure out what's going on here. And let's remember, it's 170,000 square feet, and that was not what was represented to the Navy. Thank you.
Any questions for this speaker? Thank you.
Mark Johnson, and our last speaker is Jared Brandwine.
Madam Chair, he comes up just to, for a point that Ms. Marsh had brought up. We did contact Mr. Mumon with Oceana, and we received verbal confirmation that the change in size does not affect his letter. So we did double check that. We do understand that was a change in the plan, but we did make contact, and we did review that with the Navy.
All right, thank you. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yeah, I'm Jared Brandwine. I'm the Executive Director of the Back Bay Restoration Foundation. We represent approximately 20,000 members, most of whom live in the southern watersheds. And we fully support Commissioner Barnes's position on additional impervious surfaces in our southern watersheds. For 33 years, we've been commenting on land use changes like those before you today. We oppose the transition area, Sherwood Lakes, Asheville Park, and many other projects the city approved without regard to modern land management practices. Frankly, we're tired of saying we told you so. In that vein, that's why we have a legal action pending right now against the Army Corps of Engineers for the city's hard engineering fix for Asheville Park. We're fully supportive of private property rights. However, those rights end where our communal noses meet, especially when there's no investment-backed expectation that relies on upzoning. In this case, you have to upzone in order to get this facility in there. It really doesn't make any difference as an investor because they put money into the planning of this, that they are rewarded with upzoning. That's a risk that you take in a capitalist system. Increasing impervious surface in the southern watersheds on mostly hydric soils without modern hydrogeomorphology hydrogeomorphology models is delusional. And basically, as Steve said, it's death by 1,000 cuts for the southern watersheds. We feel the city needs to place a moratorium on zoning on upzoning until we can fully evaluate stormwater impacts in context with sea level rise, subsidence, and modern techniques. You know, just a side note, although we respect Mr. Bourdain's opinions, you guys should realize that he was the lawyer for Sherwood Lakes, I think also Asheville Park, and many other of the poorly planned developments within the southern watersheds. That's about it.
Any questions for the speaker? All right, thank you very much.
No questions? Thank you.
That's all the speakers.
Okay, Mr. Royal, would you like an opportunity to present a rebuttal?
Yes, I'll be brief. No question. We need to fix flooding. City of Virginia Beach has committed a lot of money. They've diverted a lot of money to study flooding. It's already underway. A lot of work has been done. There's still a lot of work to do. There's a lot of fixes that need to happen. A moratorium on zoning, some people do not want to hear this, but I mean, you have to have development. You got to control it. It's got to be quality development. You got to control it. But the answer is, if you're going to have development, then there is zero impact. The only way we know to do that are extensive studies. I feel like nobody trusts an engineer, but that's exactly what we do. That's all we can do. We can't, you know, the citizens don't understand the hydraulics, the systems that we look at. We look at and we have very, very strict standards right now. That's what we're doing. Putting a little more impervious, which actually we're not. That became a two-story building. That's the upsizing there. And obviously, whatever impervious we're putting on the site is accommodated with our calculations. Please bring staff up again. Ask staff what they have put us through and whether or not they are confident that we can do this with no impact. So I would appeal to you there that, yes, this is just one project we're talking about. There's going to be others here. There's going to be others across the city in watersheds of concern. But we're looking at that very closely. J-Luce, by the way, it was handed to me during the talk, they don't have a problem with the drainage there. I've actually got maps where they have colored the areas of concern. But we don't want the Navy to go away. Nobody does. The Navy has approved this development. They like this development within their easement. So that's all I got to say. I will stand by if you have any more questions. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Royal? I actually have two. One of the speakers made a comment about this site would be draining into the ditch on Harper's.
Yes, ma'am.
So is that accurate, that the
That's-
BMP will drain into that ditch?
Correct. I mean, that's the way the outfall goes now. But understand, of course, that it is held back and it is timed as to when it goes out. It's not just, hey, let's dump all the water in Harper's and make it worse. That's what we have to figure. Let the peak of the storm go through so that there's no more impact downstream. But that's the direction of flow. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And the other question I had is, what caused the increase from the 107 to the 170?
Just the user, the intended user wanted more space, and again, with going up 2 stories, it still fit on the site, and there's no real increase in impervious, but that's
So
the
it didn't
intention.
change any
Yeah, and it could be less than that. That's the maximum that would go in there. I mean, the current user may say, I only need 110, and that's all we'll build.
Any other questions, Jeff?
Yeah, we focused a lot on stormwater, and I had to switch gears, from that because it's important. But the traffic aspect of this, and I know that, this data center is only going to have 30 to 40 personnel working there, I think total. So it's not a lot, but we're providing access off of Dam Neck, and it looks like it's anticipated, just from the discussion that this is ultimately this whole area is about 760 acres, And this is just one little cul-de-sac, off of, this, entire development. And so, it's kind of important because this is, the first, one of the first businesses in this area to go in. So, it's going to be setting, precedents, and, we're providing this access off of Dam Neck. I don't know if you can answer this, but, the anticipated businesses that now are going to have access to that proposed 110-foot right-of-way, it's going to increase, the traffic. Not a lot for this, but, for future businesses, it might have an impact. Why not on the Harpers? And I know that Harpers can't support it, but, at least, a larger volume of traffic. But was it looked at to widen Harpers to provide improvements, from the data center down to Dam Neck, to possibly widen, add turn lanes? Maybe that would provide a better access, left turn lane. You'll have a left turn onto Dam Neck as, opposed to just right turn. Because I think that's only right out. Is that right? Or
No,
is there?
No,
Oh, it's going to be right in.
I can answer that. That's a
Okay.
very good question, though. Can you go to the aerial, please? And I may call on the traffic. Is Rick still here? Traffic engineer left. Anyway, very good question. There are existing median breaks on Dam Neck Road. Dam Neck Road itself is limited access, so these median breaks are set up. We've just drawn a cul-de-sac because we have to have a turnaround. We can't leave a stub. That's intended to be the first leg of the internal traffic that would be in here. At the appropriate point, there might need to be a signal in there, but traffic engineering will look at every one of the applications that comes in. And I wish Rick Lohman was here. He actually spoke to me before the meeting and said, "You're not doing any access on Harper's Road, are you? Because it's too narrow, it's too dangerous. It's 10-foot lanes with a 2-foot shoulder, and even if we could do something on our side, you would still have an issue on the rest of it that you don't want to encourage that traffic there." We do have an access for additional emergency vehicles, but it's planned from traffic engineering, from the road design of Dam Neck Road to put all of that traffic out there. So yes, sir, very good question. But it's not just a cul-de-sac for this development.
Okay, all right, I've got another one. Building, according to the comprehensive plan, track for this area, it's hoped, it's planned that, attractive building designs should be showcased, along key arterials. And, I would say that, this would qualify. The tilt wall construction, is that, what is that composed of? Is it just concrete block walls that are just tilted up and put in place, or is
Looking for whoever's controlling. Have you got my rendering in there by chance? There. It's tilt-up panel. The intention is to have fenestration to make it look better. Tilt-up panel can be very attractive. The Home Depot at Lynn Haven and Princess Anne actually won a Planning Commission award. That's tilt-up panel. That has a thin brick facade on it, so you can do things with it. It's easier to construct, it's quicker to construct, it's stronger, which they want these things pretty much hurricane-proof because you don't want the data centers to go down. But in looks, planning staff looks at that to make sure that we're not putting up an ugly, just concrete building.
Okay. What's the landscaping plan that, it kind of makes reference to certain types of plantings, like a ha-ha? The perimeter of the site will be a landscaping feature called a...
Ha-ha is a ditch, which kind of shows there, back in, I think it was medieval times, that was kind of their barrier wall. As opposed to putting up like a Jersey barrier, which like you might see in an FBI building, they put in a ditch, which it's a natural looking thing. Now, we're still doing landscaping, as you can see from the drawing there, frontages, interior parking lot, et cetera. The ha-ha is just an additional measure, security measure, but it's a natural thing to where you kind of see a ditch that goes up to where somebody can't just drive through if they wanted to go in the facility. I asked the same question when they said ha-ha. I wanted to know what that was. So, yeah, that's what a ha-ha is.
questions? All right.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and close this public hearing and open it up to discussion amongst the commissioners. Any questions, any comments? Yes, Dave.
Well, he can go first.
Thank you, David.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
you.
You do.
I'll preface this by saying I have a high degree of concern about stormwater management in the southern watershed and its protection. I also have a consciousness about people who have land that they should have a right to develop if it can be responsibly developed, and especially property that's subject to the severe restrictions that are on this property and that limits the uses that could be made of this property. We have to take that into account. We're here to make a land use decision. What's interesting is that this is a large tract of land that this is carved out of. This is only, I think I'm correct to say 19 acres, is that the?
10.
And the intensity with which this has been approached in terms of planning and engineering, being concerned about stormwater management, meeting current regulations, anticipating future regulation, is impressive. I have to take it, we as a decision-making body, have to take the advice that we're getting from professional staff and the input we're getting from the applicant and from people who are in opposition. But we have to accept we can't create in our own minds about what is good or bad engineering or whether it's likely to work or whatever. So fortunately, with our concern about the future, this is a good test. You know, this is probably one of the most conservative approaches to relating to stormwater management possible, because I think they know what the new regulations are, and they knew there was going to be a lot of scrutiny considering where it's located. So we will know when this is built that whether or not it's adequate. It's probably certainly more adequate than anything's been built before in this area. And if there's a problem with it, then we can deal with it. We would know not to do that in the next iteration. But I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying this is a project that is helpful to the city of Virginia Beach in terms of economic development. It's something I think that the landowner is entitled to do. Much care has been taken to plan it properly, and I'm going to have to support this application.
Dave.
Before I speak my piece, I note that Elvis has re-entered the building. Come on up. He's so good at what he does, when he leaves the room, everything starts coming apart. Rick Lohman. Mr. Royal was making reference to Harper's Road.
Yes.
And the potential for, and someone had asked, can you make some access on Harper's Road rather than Dam Neck Road? And he had recounted a conversation that he had with you, and since you got dragged back from your desk,
Sure.
I was just hoping you could speak to the conditions on Harper Road and the implications of traffic with regard to this project.
Okay. Well, Dam Neck Road, again, is access-controlled roadway. We've talked about this before. The fact that there is a median opening there and that it was set up for some sort of access would say that, there's a planned level of access that's meant to be off of Dam Neck Road. The way that it was set up would indicate that it was meant to be a public street, at that intersection, because again, no private access, so we don't want sporadic access all up and down Dam Neck Road, but a well-regulated and a well-maintained system of median openings to keep as much of the capacity as we can on Dam Neck Road by eliminating access points and excess median openings. So the fact that one's there, it was set up for that. They're setting this up for the future by providing this public street that comes off of there, and it probably won't be the last as that northern portion of that property is developed. If it's developed, it will feed off of the new road that we're building, or they're building with this. As far as Harper's Road is a very narrow road. We do have run off the road crashes there. It's not meant for a lot of traffic. And one of the things that we talked about with this is that we didn't want to see access off of Harper's Road, around that bend since Dam Neck Road was there. I won't say for sure that a signal will be put at Dam Neck in the future at this point, but if enough development, grows up around it, around that roadway, we could potentially, or if the southern side develops, you could potentially see a traffic signal there. But Harper's Road is probably not the best place for access for this site because of that. Now, if they improved Harper's Road all the way up to the access point, that could be an option, and we did bring that up.
All right, I appreciate your coming back. Sorry to drag away from your desk.
No more questions? That's it?
I just wanted to address what I was hoping I would try and finish up with Mr. Royal. I think had made reference to. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry about your finger. Now, to my point. One thing I think I really am disappointed in is no one here today has spoken, I don't believe, enthusiastically enough about this use. There isn't a community on the East Coast that wouldn't love to have what we have with these subsea cables landing at our shore. For years, we have said our three economic pillars are tourism, agriculture, and the military. But we've always wanted to diversify. And now we have this opportunity to diversify into a much higher income. Listen, the gentleman's made an excellent point about the return on investment that data centers have, 9.5 as opposed to losing money on residential or $1.50 off of some other type of industrial use. This is an unbelievable opportunity for Virginia Beach. This is the beginning of undersea cables coming to Virginia Beach. The building got bigger, not the footprint of the building on the ground, but the building got bigger by adding a second floor because of demand. What community wouldn't want that for this kind of use? So it's a marvelous opportunity for Virginia Beach, and we ought to recognize that. It's not just a warehouse somewhere with a bunch of pallets with, I don't know, mattress bedding on them and something like that. It's an enormous economic development opportunity to Virginia Beach. It is a small site. It's 10 acres. It's not 800 acres. It's not 300 acres. This is an application for a 10-acre site, 6 acres of which are the pond. 3 is the building, 1 is the road. So those are the facts, not what else we might say. Those are the facts. And it has been over-engineered, as far as I can tell, on the stormwater, because that's a mighty big pond for this site. So I don't know what else we do other than listen to what our city experts say, the engineers say, with regard to stormwater on this site for this application. Not when the moon is in the 7th house, not about some other, a housing development a decade or a decade and a half ago. But on this application, the facts are clear that it's straight. I just don't see any real credible reason to oppose it. In fact, I'm enormously excited about it. I hope we have more of these. I hope we have more of the undersea cables. I hope we find more ways to capitalize on this opportunity. And if we don't, we're crazy. So, as I said, there isn't a community up and down the East Coast that wouldn't like to be in Virginia Beach's shoes. I'm sure glad we're in them, and I hope you all will support it. I certainly will, and look forward to the next one. Thanks.
Ron?
I agree with Dave wholeheartedly. I think that what's being proposed is a very compatible use. It's exactly what I think we want to see in this area of the city. And I think that the opportunity to capitalize, to see all this data flowing through our city and not be able to capitalize on it is it's very frustrating, quite frankly. And here we have a business that possibly will, and hopefully possibly will grow. I think it's tremendous. I don't know what else you would put here that what other kind of clean industry do we want? And this is it, in my mind. Yeah, and I fully recognize the issues with drainage, but, you know, when Randy Royal mentioned that this represents 45% of the site versus the 12 to 15%, I mean, that tells you something right there. It's 3 times the size of your typical stormwater systems, and that's the emphasis is there. And I'm with Dave. You have to pay attention to what our expert staff is doing. And I'm like, as I mentioned in informal, on a couple of applications or a couple site plans we have in the city, the scrutinization is amazing right now. And so I don't think they're missing anything. So I am supporting this.
All right, thank you. Don?
I'd like for the engineer to come up and give us the short version of what they did this morning so we can have it for the record about the stormwater at this site. Our stormwater specialist from the staff, DSC.
They're fighting over who's going to come talk to us.
Not for the last time.
I think it's important that we can have their statement on the record for.
Thank you. Good observation.
You got
Thank
a short straw?
My name is Seth Edwards. I'm the DSC Engineering Supervisor with the Planning Department. Do you have any specific questions you wanted me to address?
I
with
want
the
to know
stormwater?
how the stormwater plan for this site has addressed with the new issues or the new regulations, the size of it and all, what kind of impact it's going to have. Is it going to have a zero impact or whatever?
So the final design will be hammered out during site plan review. At that point, it will be incorporated into the city swim model, which is the entire Basin 10, which goes all the way through West Neck Creek down to Indian River Road, I believe. So it analyzes impact from this site upstream to the end of Harper's Road, where the basin ends, all the way down to West Neck Creek at Indian River Road. What we'll be looking for during site plan review is to make sure that in the 2-year storm, 10-year storm, and 100-year storm events, there is 0.00 increase in the peak water surface level at any of the nodes that we have anywhere in that model. So 0.00 feet of change.
That's pretty much zero, isn't it?
To the 1/8 of an inch.
So you say that the size of this retention pond here is more than enough to accommodate the runoff from this 170,000 square foot building?
Based on our models, everything shows that there will be no impact upstream, downstream, and this can handle the development.
And that's going to hold that water until the flooding water recedes, and then it'll be released?
Yes, it accounts for the existing tailwaters, any high waters that you'd have in West Neck Creek, and the contributing waters from the rest of the watershed, all the neighboring developments, neighborhoods, roadways, all of that.
So I'm going to give you this scenario. If we didn't do anything, how much better would this retention be of holding water on that 10 acres than if we didn't do anything to it?
We're looking at equivalent. What's there now is modeled in the existing system. We show all the farm ditches. We show any ponding that would happen on top of those fields. We show how much runoff happens because of the types of soils that are there now. And we model the pond in the post-development, and it's going to come out to have the same impact.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Jack.
This area is part of the Special Economic Growth Area 3, identified in the comprehensive plan, and which identifies this area as having development opportunities. So I think that what's been described with is within the recommended policies that are in the comprehensive plan. It's the high quality employment center. It appears to be relatively attractive building. Mr. Royal and the traffic engineer addressed the traffic issues, and it appears that the stormwater has been addressed. So in my view, this meets the intent of the comprehensive plan. So I'm in support of it. It doesn't seem to be and it wasn't well described how this consolidates into a bigger plan, which was part of the recommended policies in the for the special economic growth area, but it's not a big deal.
Thank you. Any other comments? The only comment that I have is, would it be possible before this, I mean, it sounds like this is gonna be going to council, to have the Navy update their letter before it goes to council? So if there's questions on that, that would be addressed ahead of time.
Yes, ma'am.
Would anybody like to make a motion? Yes, Dave.
Madam Chairwoman, I move approval of the application.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
The vote is open.
Oh, I have a disclosure to make.
Oh.
Okay. I need to disclose that one of my law partners is mentioned as counsel. He's counsel to the landowner, has not had any real involvement in this particular matter, has no financial involvement, nor does anyone else in our firm in this property. And so I will be voting. I will not abstain.
The vote is open. Mr. Barnes?
Oh, sorry.
In a recorded vote of 8-1, agenda item D1 has been approved pending an updated letter from the Navy.
Thank you. Would you call the next item?
Yes, ma'am. Our last agenda item is D2, G's Group LLC. It's an application for a conditional use permit mini warehouse on property located at 1964 Fisher Arch in the Princess Anne District.
I'm going to be abstaining from this item. The applicant is a client,
Okay.
and per our city attorney, I get to leave.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy your Labor Day, Mr. Weiner.
Yeah, you need, yes, Mr. Graham, if you.
Excuse me,
you
Mr.
intend to
Badon.
abstain.
I had to say something. I'm gonna abstain because I have a competing use in a nearby market. So I'm gonna abstain as well.
You could have a nice Labor Day, too.
It's probably warmer.
So the record would reflect, please, that Mr. Graham and Mr. Weiner have left the meeting.
All right,
Madam Chair, members of the commission, for the record, Eddie Berton, Virginia Beach attorney. I'm here representing both the applicant, the G's Group, and Mr. David Gianniscoli, who's one of the principals, is here with us this afternoon, along with the project civil engineer, Michael Gaddy. I've also had the privilege of representing the owners of this property going all the way back, not to the 1950s when they first acquired the property, but David Kellum and Mike Fisher, who a number of you, I'm sure, knew, were the developers of this Sandbridge Marketplace and some of the development that long preceded that. This property is at the very northern boundary of the transition area, adjacent to a lot of significant additional commercial and residential development. The Food Lion Shopping Center, which was developed back in the, I believe, late 60s, early 70s, it's over 55,000 square feet. And there's the marketplace that was rezoned 2008, 2009 conditionally with proffers under the comp plan as it existed at the time. At that point, a subdivision plan and subdivision construction plans were all submitted to the city in 2009, reviewed and approved. All the infrastructure, including stormwater management infrastructure, was all approved, all bonded, all built, all accepted, and a number of the properties within the marketplace have developed subsequent to that time, including the Tractor Supply. I'm just going to name a couple. There have been a lot. Tractor Supply, basically about 15,000 square feet. Anderson's Nursery, and these are ones that needed use permits. 24,000 square feet of building, over 11,000 square feet of greenhouse under roof. All of those properties have developed. At the time, the stormwater system for this rezoned B2 property was approved. All of the engineering was for 75% impervious cover. 75% impervious cover, and I think you all heard that this morning in the pre-briefing. The Gianniscolis undertook this project over 18 months ago, had meetings with staff, meetings with the TATAC ITA committee, listened to them, had some great feedback. We have a proposal today with a two-story structure with 3 inside, which is very typical of air-conditioned self-storage facilities, the newer ones, the better ones. There's a big demand, especially the Sandbridge community in this area. That's what's brought this on. That's why we've had all these meetings. Well, once we got to the point where everybody really liked the barn, what it looks like, the rural vernacular, nothing like any facility like this I've ever seen, then we've been involved with the stormwater folks for close to a year. As I said, millions of dollars invested, debts taken, all of this infrastructure put in place. And if this didn't need a use permit, this would be approved because we have only 51% impervious surface. We have added additional BMP on the site, a substantial BMP on the site. It meets all current guidelines. It meets it with the sea level rise taken into account, and Seth can talk to you about that if you all want to hear from him. But the owners of this property who've invested lots of money and have lots of debt, they are going to develop this property. This isn't new development. This is something that's been approved for over 10 years as far as the zoning and almost that for the infrastructure, and that's been built and exists. So we're bettering the situation in every regard. The use from a traffic standpoint, a lot less traffic than your typical B2 use by a long shot. We, again, have reduced the impervious surface down to 51%. The 2008 proffers, at that point, I don't think it was in the comp plan, this 10,000 square foot idea, because nothing of that appears in the write-up. Nothing of that appears in any of the write-ups of Anderson's Tractor Supply, the 45,000 square foot Harris Teeter development on the opposite corner. I think that was put in more recently and really is because there's not really anything else in the transition area that could be developed commercially other than around Pungo, and I think that's where that came from. That's my recollection anyway, but there's nothing in our comp plan, in our proffers or any of the write-ups of any of the development that's occurred with use permits about this 10,000 square foot idea, but it's in there now. I think it was put in there the last time around because the focus was on potential development around Pungo under the study that the council commissioned. So we've spent all this time and effort. Stormwater will work. It's not new development. Again, as I said, I'm completely sympathetic, as are my clients, to the idea we don't want this to flood. It never has flooded. We haven't had any flooding problems. In fact, this property was a subject of a use permit application many years ago for a burrow pit because it's sandy soil. There's a lot of sand under this piece of property. The whole marketplace piece of property, it drains extremely well. It's not primarily the hydric soils that were referenced earlier. The pipes that Steve Barnes showed you all this morning, that's a project for the city on Sandbridge Road widening. My clients have cooperated every time that's needed to take place, haven't gone to court with the city in any way, have settled everything with regard to additional lands the city has needed. They've worked with the city. Mr. Kellum and Mr. Fisher, I neglected to mention, both passed away in the same year with leukemia, unrelated, but their spouses and families have inherited this property, and it's really been a struggle for them. And if this, again, didn't require a use permit, if it was by right, then it would have already been approved because we meet all the current stormwater requirements far, far stricter than when it was approved or than at any time in the past. And we won't be causing any additional flooding. All the water does go to the former Burrow Pit, Regional BMP, the Reeser Pit that is called now Red Mill Pond. It does go north. It's designed, and from day one has gone north. It does eventually work its way back around to go into Back Bay, but it's a long process, takes days and days. So this is not a rezoning for something new. It's property that is going to develop. We think this is a very good development, one there is a need for in the area. You know, I can't say it enough, and I'm a little disappointed at what I heard Jared say on the last application. What Steve's after here, I couldn't agree with more. But the reality is, the snarky comment about "I told you so," the city of Virginia Beach has slowed down growth in this area of the city for the last 25 years. Very slow growth. I don't know whether Jared has been to Chesapeake or Suffolk or all the communities in eastern North Carolina whose stormwater goes into the same Pamlico sound system. And I know Steve and I have talked about this at some length. You know, it's a regional issue. It matters to us a lot. It matters to a lot of my friends and clients a lot. You know, we want to get it right, but we're not the cause. We may have a little bit to do with it, but Virginia Beach is not the only cause, and certainly I don't think the biggest cause of what has happened over the course of the last few years. Because you look at the level of development, it's very, very small. The ad hominem attack on me, I'm not an engineer, but Sherwood Lakes and Asheville Park I did represent. And Sherwood Lakes, just to put it on the record, before it was Sherwood Lakes, was a borough pit that was just charging 1 million gallons of water a day. 1 million gallons of water a day into West Neck Creek. That's not happening anymore and hasn't been happening since the property was developed. So it's not so simple as ad hominem attacks, plain and simple, okay? This is a project that's been approved, all the infrastructure's been accepted. They're going above and beyond for a use that's a low intense use with 51% impervious surface instead of 75%, which is what could be approved out there. Now, again, the newer rules, which we are adhering to, nobody's going to court with a vested rights argument because we don't want anything to flood either. But there is one that could be made, not doing that. These people want to do a good job. The Gianniscolis have developed numerous properties in Virginia Beach very well, very successfully. They're great corporate citizens in the city of Virginia Beach, and they've spent the time, the effort, the year and a half to go through this process and see it through, and that's exactly where we are at this point. But, you know, the idea of a deny everything moratorium when you have people who have a lot of money invested and debt to pay and stop commerce it just doesn't fit. It may fit certain circumstances. I'm not saying in every situation that we have to prove everything, but it's very skewed and it doesn't look at the whole picture of the problem. And again, I think Steve is spot on with regard to the need to get ability for overwash in Back Bay. But Back Bay is getting water coming north from northeastern North Carolina, and that's a big part of this as well. And it's got to be a regional thing. Virginia Beach can't take the entire brunt of shutting down its economy and putting people into bankruptcy when they're willing to go the extra mile, which is the case in this situation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
We have two speakers, ma'am. Melanie Marino and then Jared Brandwine.
Hello, Melanie Marino again. This is a theme called the Southern Watershed today for the two instances that I've stood before you. And I don't want to be up here today, and I don't want to be fighting this, but I have to oppose this build. Until the city council prioritizes a resolution that gets the water in the Southern Watershed out of the Back Bay, every single build in this watershed is going to add a drop into a bowl that does not dump out for 85 miles south. That's just a fact. I don't like it, you don't like it, but something has to be done before we add to it. And every build that comes before you for approval in this watershed is adding to that problem. I feel like it's reckless. There's no formal stormwater plan that can assure water be kept on this site. This was originally zoned in 2008. We didn't have this problem identified in this watershed in 2008. That's a fact. We have to deal with what's current and what's now, and what's now is we're flooding. I cannot drive off my property. My neighbors can't drive off their property without having a four-wheel drive truck. That's just a fact. And I need to stand before you to support that you consider that. In review of the transition area guidelines, this bill does not serve the definition of a buffer for a low-density rural area. This is a bill that would be appropriate for a light industrial area. I don't believe that a storage area would add to the skyline of any child peering out the windows of the preschool across the street, nor any person traveling or walking that shopping area. It would actually deter walking. It would be an eyesore, and it would not serve shoppers to spend money or continue past it on a stroll. The last issue I have on this build is that I don't understand what is neighborhood serving about this build. Where is the data supporting that? We have huge homes surrounding this proposed build that exceed 2,500 square feet with double garages. How would a facility to store things serve our neighborhoods in this particular area? That's all I have to say about this build. If there's any questions.
Thank you for coming down again, Ms. Morrow.
Thank you.
Jared Brandwine.
Once again,
Can you state your name for the record?
yeah, I'm sorry, Jared Brandwine. I'm with Back Bay Restoration Foundation. I'm the executive director. We've been in existence for approximately 33 years. This project is a lot easier for me to address than the previous D1 project because this is in the transition area, an area that Back Bay Restoration Foundation opposed from its original conception in the late 90s. If you go down there, many of you don't live there, if you drive past the green line and go into the transition area, there's absolutely nothing transitional about the transition area. It looks like every other portion of Virginia Beach that's built out. Fortunately, we still have area within the transition area that's green, that's agricultural. But there's not much in the transition area that's transitional. I fully respect Eddie's positions. He's been a worthy opponent for the 3 times I've been here. I was here in the 80s. I was here in the early 2000s as the manager of Back Bay. And I'm here now as the executive director of BBRF. Certainly a worthy opponent because he won most of the time, but the city lost. Look at Sherwood Lakes right now. Lakes our council and this planning commission agreed that open water is the same as open space. I haven't been able to walk on water yet. Once again, just because a client is in debt for putting their money on the line, expecting planning commission and city council to upzone or approve developments that are not in the best interest of the watershed. This is a capitalist society. That's a bad investment. It's not the job of the city to bail out bad investments. We're adamantly opposed to this. But if history is prelude, you'll approve it. And then in another 10 years or less, we'll be back here saying, I told you so, once again. I guess my time is closed up.
Any questions? Great, thank you, Mr. Brandwine.
Thanks.
No more speakers.
All right, would the applicant like a chance to rebuttal?
I'll be brief. Jared is a very, very smart guy, and he's very pragmatic. And I certainly, respect what he has to say and what he says, and I appreciate it. But the reality, and you all understand this, is that this isn't a rezoning today. This is a piece of property that has been zoned for 10 years and has been fully developed. It has numerous by right development options that would provide more impervious surface, less additional added stormwater retention and protection than would otherwise be required, that because it's a use permit you're getting, excuse me, and more traffic. All right, so the absolute reality is, if I were coming in today and asking to, I wouldn't be here. If I was asking to rezone this piece of property, I wouldn't be here. Okay, it's been rezoned for a long time. It's at the northern, y'all know where it is. I won't go over and over again. So this is and again, I get the point, and I actually agree with the point. We need to resolve the issue with Back Bay. It's a bigger issue, is my only point. I didn't stand up here and say, you need to approve this because my clients inherited debt. The point is, it's going to develop, and this is a better way for it to develop. That's my point, all right? And if that was lost on others, I want to make that very clear. This property can be developed and doesn't have to come up here before you to be developed, and it can have 75%, although it may not get to 75% impervious surface. No one would ever see it, but they've got to meet the requirements. But could that happen at 75%? Yeah, they may have to do an underground BMP underneath the parking lot or something like that, but that's the point. It's a already developed vested rights piece of property. So that is, I'm sorry to run on, but, and again, I'm not up here to try to suggest that the concern isn't legitimate. It is, but we have to balance that. We can certainly say no new development until we get it resolved, if that's what the council ultimately wants to do, but you can't punish somebody who's been there for all these many years, you know, for doing everything that they can do to make the situation better, not worse. Thank you.
Any questions? No. We'll go ahead and close this public hearing and open it up to the commissioners. Jack?
All right, this, it's already Zone B2, and, I can't say that I'm in favor of the land use, within the transition area. The usage of a storage unit, on the south side of Sandbridge Road. But, this corner is already zoned B2. And, with that being said, and with the explanation, and with the, what appears to be a sufficient stormwater management plan, that I'm in favor of it. And partly it's because of the detail and the amount of work that's gone into the elevation views and the architecture for the facility. And I'm not sure that that would be achieved if it were something else, some other structure at that location. It could be developed by right, by something else, and we've heard that before. But I think in this case, with it's kind of somewhat appealing, for the area architecture. So I support it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? Don?
I think the city has kind of benefited because this property wasn't developed when it could have been developed back in '08. We've gotten a very less intense use than most B zonings. We've gotten a better stormwater plan because of the additional retention pond that we've got here on the property. We've got less lot coverage, so that way, than we could have had back then. I think I think the city has benefited, and I think the renderings that we've been provided of, the building for a storage unit is a pretty attractive storage unit, my estimation. Mr. Ripley said my farm needs to look like that storage barn there. So it's a pretty nice looking barn. But with all due respect to the needs that we have for stormwater and the problems we got down south, I don't think this is gonna add any more. I think what we're doing with these projects like this, even though we're approving them, we're bringing more and more attention to the stormwater problems that we've got down south, and more people are becoming aware of it, and I think we will get some help on it in, hopefully in the not too distant future, because we definitely need it. But I can't see that these folks that this property belonged to and could have developed it, 10, 11 years ago, I can't see that since they've come in now with this use that we shouldn't approve it. So I'm going to support the application.
All right, thank you. Ron?
I was initially concerned with, did this use meet the guidelines of the transition area? And the more I looked into it, the more I think it probably does. I think the reason why you see the elevations like you see them is because of the guidelines. The guidelines are not something that you must do or have to do. It's not zoning, it's guidelines. But guidelines help shape looks and uses, although mini storage, in this area, mini storage really do serve neighborhoods immediately around them. I mean, you don't drive across city to store something. You would generally in the general areas where you use it. And also supports the businesses as well. So, it's probably a practical use for it. And like Don says, there are other uses that I know came along over the years that were looking at this area before the transition area really kind of got their hands around what they wanted to see in there. And I know there's been a lot of housing ideas that certainly wasn't compatible with the transition, that would like to have gone in there. There's a lot of uses that like to be there. But this is, I think, again, I'm not enamored by having mini storage here, but I don't think it's located behind the buildings that face Sandbridge Road, where you see, and it's off the beaten path. And if you go down there a lot, and I go by there a lot because I got a place in Sandbridge, and Anderson's is a great store, but Anderson doesn't do the business Home Depot does. And it has to work at it. Some days that parking lot's real empty. So having a little extra business in the area, I don't think it's going to hurt. And, the fact that we've got by the idea, I don't want to beat the drainage issue. We've kind of beat that to death today, but that was addressed, I think. So anyway, I'm going to support it.
Does this side of the room have any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
All right.
Second.
The vote is open.
By recorded vote of 6-1, with Commissioners Weiner and Graham abstaining, agenda item D2 has been approved.
Thank you. Is there any further business?
Oh, I just want to say, I do really appreciate the speakers that have come up and spoken, concerning the stormwater, because it is very insightful and
I
it's
agree.
taken.
And they care
very
about
well.
the city. I agree, I appreciate that. All right, if there is no more business, on behalf of my fellow commissioners, I would like to thank everyone for attending today and thank the planning director and his staff for their excellent work in preparing today's agenda. This meeting is adjourned.